Over the years, I have had the wonderful opportunity to officiate many weddings. And the best part of officiating weddings for me is getting to know the couple. I always like to spend at least 2 or 3 sessions getting to know folks before the wedding and then be involved somewhat in the wedding planning, or at least try to contain some of the anxiety around wedding planning. So it's a beautiful experience. I was thinking about one couple this week, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But it was a young couple in New York City that I knew, I was somewhat friends with, and they were on a spiritual journey, intentional spiritual journey of growth, development, love. They were in love with one another. They cared deeply for one another, and in my view, they had a mature love and a mature faith as a couple. And I still remember their ceremony. The morning of the ceremony, we were together, and the groom, he seemed a little anxious, but not overly anxious. But the closer we came to the time, he seemed to become just a little bit more anxious. And so we're standing there, waiting on his soon-to-be wife, and the music begins to play. And then I notice he's starting to kind of move around like this, right? You know, he's adjusting the tie that doesn't need to be adjusted, right? And I notice a little bead of sweat on his forehead. And then he starts to breathe a little bit heavy. And I'm like, "Are you okay?" He said, I think I'm about to have I think I'm hyperventilating." And so he starts to breathe very heavy then, and she's coming down the aisle, and I'm thinking, what do I do right now? So I just said, "Hey, brother, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. It's all good. Just take a deep, deep breath." So he took a deep, deep breath, and then he calmed down when he saw how beautiful she was. And then they held hands, and we started the ceremony. Why did I think about them this week? It reminded me, along with Jesus, that there is a risk in love. Loving comes with a risk. To love is to risk. And Jesus embodies that risk this morning. He was traveling through Samaria when he encounters a woman. Now, we all know about the relationship between Samaritans and Jewish folk, right? They didn't get along. The Jewish folk considered them outsiders, unclean, not a part of the fold of God's people. And church, you would never, ever, 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 ever see a Jewish man speaking with a Samaritan woman. Ever. It did not happen. But Jesus was a risk taker. A risk taker for love. He's actually the one who initiated the conversation, isn't he? "Can you get me a drink of water?" And through that encounter with this Samaritan woman, her life was transformed, and so were his disciples. They couldn't believe it when they walked back from grabbing lunch that Jesus was even interacting with this woman from Samaria. But Jesus always did that, didn't he? We were talking about it this morning. I can imagine those disciples just all the time being shocked. Like, what is he doing now? Oh my gosh, somebody go get Jesus. His own mama called him crazy, right? He's out of his mind. Go get Jesus. He is out of his mind. What is he doing? He was a risk taker for love. Whether it was the man who was blind or the woman who was blind, the person with leprosy, the rich, the tax collector, the poor, the beggar, the person with the severe disability or mental illness, whoever it was, Jesus was always taking a risk for love. And he was always initiating that risk. It was as if Jesus was intentionally turning conventional wisdom, conventional religion, upside down, turning it on its head, taking a risk for love. And in doing so, he was building the beloved community. Think about it. Throughout history, the churches that got it right, were the ones who took a risk for love. Think about the white churches during the civil rights movement. The white churches in the civil rights movement who were supportive, standing in solidarity, taking a risk with their sisters and brothers, fighting for justice and equality. Those are the churches who took a risk for love, and they got it right. They were standing on the right side of history. Think about the AIDS pandemic. In the 80s, it's been so long ago now, right? So many churches were condemning our sisters and brothers in the LGBTQ plus community, calling it sin and this and that, and saying and doing hurtful things. But the churches that got it right are the ones who showed compassion and love and stood in solidarity with their sisters and brothers who were suffering. Those are the churches that were on the right side of history. Those are the churches who were actually following Jesus. I'm not sure who the other churches were following, but it sure as hell wasn't Jesus. And think about our society today. How are we continuing to take a risk for love? I'm so grateful to be a part of a church, First Church, and also the UCC. A church that is always taking a risk for love. It's part of the excitement of our future, First Church, is it not? Anticipating where Jesus is calling us and leading us to take a risk for love. We got a call the other day from the sergeant of the Richmond Police Department, or the Chesterfield County Police Department, Sergeant Lisa. And unfortunately, there's some mistrust in the LGBTQ plus community with the police department. They're not sure that, there's some issues there that need to be resolved, some conversations that need to happen. And there's a lot of conversations that need to happen, and we know that with the police departments. And Sergeant Lisa was thinking of a good place for those conversations to take place, some mediation to take place. And she remembered First Church. She came to a wedding here for a friend of hers, and she drives by and sees the flag every day, and she thought, there it is. So very soon, the police department and our sisters and brothers in the LGBTQ plus community will be meeting here some nights of the week to talk, to build trust. And who knows where this is going to lead, because we need a lot of these kind of conversations in our society today. Where will Jesus call us, church, and invite us to take a risk for love? I still remember when I was a little boy, very little boy, even younger than Solomon, the first time that I jumped off the diving board. I had my floaties on. and I'm walking out on that board. Man, it looks like a long way down. And I ease to the end of the board, and I'm looking down. I'm scared. And then I look out there, and there's my daddy. In 6 foot of water, he's just waiting, and he's saying, "Come on, son. Just jump in. I've got you. Just jump in. I'm here." As we move into the future, church, Jesus will continue to invite us, to encourage us. Take a leap. Take a risk. Jump in for love. May we continue to take that risk. Amen.